I would just like to quickly touch upon sort of a framework of the seminar and the key ideas that emerged during the discussion, and maybe briefly add my own suggestions briefly at the end. So, one of the things that's needed in any discussion on UD, as we all know, is not just to look at the siloed prism, just military or tech, but include all the relevant facets of UDA that are critical to our interest and objective, right? So, for instance, if we, like we saw during the session today, Romit's presentation on sedimentation management, that was quite insightful for me. I didn't know many of the nuances and how the processes work. So, including how we showed that higher siltation load affects the shore erosion, port operations, etc. And how sedimentation management needs to be predictive rather than reactive, right? And for instance, it was Suchi's presentation on biofouling techniques, which suggested the need to have alternative anti-biofouling techniques. And that third one was which I found perhaps more interesting in a way was Ashwini's presentation on fisheries and aquaculture, wherein basically, essentially, he showed how conventional fishing zone advisories are just relying on data like chlorophyll and sea surface temperatures are fall short of the requirements that current underwater shifting operating data parameters that are included, and how things like, of course, MRC is working on developing the multi-parameter fishing suitability index that includes all the relevant parameters forming into a single operational advisory layer. So, like, I think from the two, one of the things, common themes that for me was not just mentioned, but could anyways be directly inferred was sometimes, or often at times, a bigger challenge is more of an institutional in nature rather than technological, right? On the technology front, as organizations again like MRC axiomatically show, is that the need is being future ready essentially means what? It essentially means that we need to move from a product or system centric approach to a solution driven architecture involving AI, ML, and something that was very, needed to be discussed, which was done yesterday, was maritime spatial planning, right? On maritime spatial planning, I think it was Cal's time yesterday, where for me, one of his key points was the need to resolve spatial conflicts on the MSP front across different underwater activities like offshore energy, mining, etc. Right? On the data point, which I think was mentioned by you, Commander Dasher, that we need to declassify data to the extent we can. I mean, when you gave the example of how US did during the World War era, I think so. The question then becomes on this: that how do we reconcile sort of dual imperatives of operational security with imperatives for us researchers and tech innovation industry, right? So, and then comes into play that what sort of organizations, NIOT, NPO, or others need to be involved in considering this exercise. On institutions, again, I think, again, you made certain points that need to be reiterated. In fact, I think this seminar could be a solid foundation for which one can write a very interesting paper on what are the institutional challenges that we face right now in the UDA space. The first was, which you mentioned again, that how West-driven IMO regulations are inadequate. You use the word catastrophic, which sort of I agree with, because of course the conditions of the tropical waters of Iowa are quite different compared to temperate waters, and how frameworks like IDEX, of course, innovation framework, how initiatives like that need to take into account the current tropical water realities. And that one thing that I was really surprised by was that, which I didn't know again, was that how certain UDA aspects, elements of assets, whatever you want to call, are over-regulated, and how certain aspects are not even looked at, like the Ministry of Earth Sciences example that you gave on MSP front. That was quite striking to me. I never imagined that Ministry of Environment wouldn't be aware of it. Uh, yes, but one of the things that Admiral Karambir also suggested, which caught my attention, was the need to have seabed warfare strategy. He gave a data example of the fact that 80 to 90% of our undersea cables are currently utilized, and the utilization rate will increase in the near future, right? So, in a future contingency, like which just happened right now, is the fact that if push comes to shove, India won't be able to reroute it, the data in a contingency, let's say 10 years down the line, right? So I think, and of course, the vulnerability, I'm not sure if it was mentioned in particular yesterday. The main, one of the clear signs of vulnerability to our undersea cables was highlighted in 2023 when this Houthi attacks in Red Sea. Their attacks actually increased our national data traffic latency since two of the cable networks connecting India to West Asia and Europe were cut, right? And one of the things on undersea cables, it's again very surprising. I was just discussing about this with Karis team. If you look at our national cybersecurity policy of 2013, if you look at National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, the mandate of it, there's somehow no mention of, not even a single mention of undersea cables in cybersecurity threats and terrorism. So what this again basically means is that there's no official plan, policy, or designated entity to protect our undersea cables, right? So I think one practical need is, of course, then besides on the institutional front, we need to have seabed sensor network to protect all the cables at the landing zones, right? And just quickly to tell some of my own inputs, because previously before ICWA, I was part of one New Delhi based organization. So I was quite involved in certain different UDA projects. So I'll just give you some of my inputs if I can, some of them which are I think relevant to this very much seminar. One thing on the institutional front, which I've argued in my paper, which is not yet out right now, is the fact that I think we need to have a national UDA authority, which has the representatives of Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Earth, Indian Navy, of course, DRDO, with not just the budget, of course, annual budget, but also one of the mandates should be, of course, to direct all the R&D priorities, both on the civilian side of the UDA and the defense side, across all relevant agencies, right? Second, institutional suggestions that I make in my paper is that if you look at the different agencies under different ministries that are involved in the UDA space, I think MOD and MOES need to consider sort of a joint program under a formal MOU, if possible, between NPOL and NIOT, National Institute of Ocean Technology, to sort of work on acoustic data, to maybe even work on deep sea, work on sensor placement, since NPOL is involved in that kind of work, and to maybe perhaps even take a shot at cable noise measurement and analysis system technologies, right? Quickly on the policy side, one point, I think we all know it's a reality which I think Sir Vish hinted in his presentation or not, is the fact that if you talk to any startup head working on UDA space or otherwise on defense side, it's what's a very bitter reality is that for very promising startups, the small ones, if they want to apply for any IDEX challenge, they don't have the the capital to develop a prototype, right? And IDEX only gives you funds once you win the IDEX challenge. And if a startup goes to a bank or a venture capitalist, generally the answer is the same, that you show the order first and then we give you the capital, right? So in that scenario, what I've argued in my paper is that MOD perhaps needs to consider sort of provision, whether in, I don't know, DAP or IDEX or in any other TDF or in any other scheme, that you compensate at least a certain percentage of NC trial cost for startups, for R&D firms, right? Needed for prototype development, right? And quickly, thirdly, on the last point on the sonar front, I don't know if this was mentioned today or yesterday. I think I heard side scan sonar multiple times, but I'm not sure if anyone mentioned multiple aperture sonars. So if you look at the West, if you look at the US in particular, and if you look at the current undersea surveillance constraints that India faces, basically, is if you talk about institutes like NPOL, NSTL, I think we need to, because private sector is not it's not involved in sonar development at best at negligible level, right? So I think institutes like, for now, institutes like NPOL and NSTL, we need to go beyond forward-looking sonars towards multiple aperture sonars, which basically relatively multiple aperture sonars have much higher resolution range. They have much higher signal to noise ratio. They have much wider SWOT coverage of the ocean, right? So that's that. And to conclude, I mean, I want to thank Commander Das sir, MRC, for, of course, organizing this very much needed and brilliant seminar. And I think in that sense, it's your organization's solid and again much needed approach of multidisciplinarity, which is actually the need of the hour for our country in this UDA space, to basically essentially develop an ecosystem that helps connect ideas with application, right? Through research, advocacy, industrial consulting, through tech innovation, through modeling, which your organization does. So yes, I really enjoyed the 2 days, and I'm thankful to MRC for organizing this seminar. I wish you, thank you, sir.